Now, it's that time of the month again where we have a bit of a chat with our resident expert here in the studio, Ambassador Yoon Cho, who is here to drop some knowledge on us about the inner workings of the diplomatic scene and have a chat about some of the things happening around the world and in the country at the moment. How are you doing today, Ambassador Yoon?
Very good, thanks. How about you?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad. I'm cruising through the spring.
Spring is in the air.
Always like a bit of spring, yeah. Get over that winter. Can't stand it. A bit warmer makes me feel pretty good. And things warming up all around the continent as well. What are we talking about today? There's been some serious major diplomatic movements as of late, haven't there?
Yes. The Biden administration is getting into the diplomatic octagon earlier than I expected. Particularly, the Biden administration is unveiling their stance vis-a-vis China as strategic threat to the United States and how it is going to deal with it. But this is only the beginning. As I mentioned a couple of months ago, the new administration's policy toward China is not much different from its predecessors. It succeeded the coalition the Trump administration put together around Indo-Pacific region, and the new administration started working on activating the network. What's important for us Koreans is how this global strategic game affects Korea as the ally of the United States and economic partner of China, particularly with the work of establishing a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula and denuclearizing North Korea.
Yeah, there's a lot of countries in this region looking who are in a similar position to Korea, economically very tied to China, strategically very tied to the United States. So what were those movements you were mentioning?
First of all, President Biden had his first telephone talk as president with China's leader Xi Jinping on February 10th. He laid out the differences with China, such as unfair trade practices, human rights issues, as well as Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, those sweet spots with China. And he also made it clear that keeping free and open Indo-Pacific is U.S. priority. And Biden followed it up on March 12th with an online summit with the Quad countries, Australia, your country, India, and Japan. And they specifically committed to promoting a free, open, rules-based order rooted in international law to advance security and prosperity and counter threats to both the Indo-Pacific and beyond. So, without naming China, they made it clear they would contain the threat, meaning the expansion of China's influence in the region, and maintain the status quo under the rubric of the rules-based order and international law. And last week, the U.S. Secretaries of State and Defense have jointly visited two allies in Northeast Asia, Japan and Korea, from March 15th to 18th. After the visit to these two countries for 2+2 meetings in both, Mr. Lloyd Austin, Secretary of Defense, headed for India, and Mr. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, went to Alaska. He joined Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, for their meetings from 18th to 19th March with the Chinese foreign policy leaders Yang Jiechi, Communist Party Foreign Affairs Director, and Wang Yi, Foreign Minister. The two sides had a big quarrel. The U.S. argued that China is posing threat to the international order, and the Chinese side rebutted this lecture and accused the U.S. of condescending behavior and interference of their domestic affairs. So the only positive element out of this confrontation may be their common understanding about the areas where they can work together, including North Korean nuclear issues.
Yeah.
So they parted even without adopting a joint statement.
Right, which is often odd in these sort of meetings, but at the same time, when you hear what the sort of name calling that was going back and forward, they at least seem to both understand what each other are.
Right,
that's for sure.
Yeah, they suspected so, but the true face came alive.
Yeah, so it is always an interesting one. I mean, you go back to some of the meetings that the U.S. presidents had with the Soviet premiers like Nixon and Khrushchev in the kitchen debates and whatnot. And you do get some really interesting ones when the two big superpowers in the world sort of get together one-on-one. Always interesting times. They were busy, but back to Korea. What did they do while they were here in Korea?
As far as their program is concerned, during their stay in Korea from 17 to 18 March, the two secretaries had bilateral meetings with their Korean counterparts, and they made a call on the Korean President, Mr. Moon Jae-in. And finally, they had their so-called 2+2 meeting, a joint meeting between two ministers of foreign and defense policies, which adopted a joint statement as the summary of their joint stance on many important issues.
Right. So during the Trump era, there were concerns about the state of the alliance between the U.S. and its Korean allies. Biden's expressed his commitment to restore the alliance. Is that something that you can just sort of click your fingers and that will be achieved? Do you think it has been?
Well, right before their arrival in Korea, the negotiation on the new SMA, or Special Measures Agreement, had been successfully wrapped up, and it was signed during the two secretaries' trip to Korea. The SMA is an agreement on burden sharing by which the Korean government covers a big part of the local cost of stationing the U.S. forces in Korea. With this negotiation done in only 46 days after the inauguration of the Biden administration, we hope that the spirit of alliance has been somehow restored. But the main part was the policy coordination between the two governments on their joint strategy on important security, global and regional issues. So Foreign Minister Chung and Secretary Blinken had their first bilateral meeting, and according to the State Department readout, they reaffirmed that the ROK-U.S. alliance is the linchpin of peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and around the world. They emphasized that North Korean nuclear and ballistic missile issues are a priority for the alliance and reaffirmed their shared commitment to address and resolve these issues. They also discussed the ongoing DPRK policy review by the United States and also reaffirmed that there are so many reaffirmed the importance of trilateral cooperation among Korea, U.S., and Japan in ensuring a free and open Indo-Pacific. This free and open Indo-Pacific always means encircling and containing China.
Basically, yes. I mean, if you look at the American bases around the Indo-Pacific, it does sort of make a sort of arc from around the Indian Ocean up to here in the Korean Peninsula of bases to sort of contain China, because China can generally only move its way outward through the ocean. It can't go backwards into land that it already has, or Russia as their sort of backup there. So it is interesting. Now, the secretaries were here, paid a call to President Moon, yeah?
Yes. They made two important points. I mean, it's a kind of a repetition, but they recognize the alliance as the linchpin for peace and security in the region. But also they emphasize the importance of reinvigorating the trilateral cooperation by having Japan. And President Moon welcomed the return of the United States on the world stage. And he was glad to note that the spirit of ROK-U.S. alliance has been restored. Yeah,
look, I mean, obviously the Biden administration has themselves a message that they're trying to get out to their Asian allies, that it's sort of a bit of a reset, which is what we were talking about before. You know, back to the old ways of alliance sharing and that sort of stuff, not the sort of bellicose rhetoric that we saw under the Trump administration. How have the media been looking at these issues?
The media was a little bit critical about the absence of some phrases or expressions, particularly about the North Korea's denuclearization, or about the joint stance about the challenges by China. But I would say that they were all addressed, albeit indirectly, by the statement. They identified the North Korean nuclear and ballistic missile issues as priority to be addressed. And their commitment to the rules-based international order, as I said, indicates their resolve to work together to deal with the challenges from China, should they undermine and destabilize such order.
Right. I mean, that's I suppose that is the big thing at the moment, isn't it? Is trying to contain China. The US has been sort of off the scene a little bit for the last 4 years. In many ways, have been unpredictable and possibly, if you ask the Europeans, rather unreliable as an ally over the last 4 years. So they definitely have to sort something out there.
And then, in defense of the Korean government, if I may, I like to remind our listeners that the Korean government has already made a lot of progress in inter-Korean relations with 3 summits between the leaders of 2 Koreas and a series of Kim-Trump summits, which once gave the hope of achieving denuclearization and a peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. Now, the Korean government wishes to create a new momentum with the new U.S. administration to engage with North Korea and restart the peace process. Then you may remember there was a statement by Kim Yo-jong, presumably number 2 person in North Korea, warning South Korea and the United States in her characteristic cynical language.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Under the circumstances, you want to be careful in your choice of words and expressions, not to give any excuses for their new provocations.
That's an interesting point that you've made there, because I have, obviously you would add more experience with this, but I have read reports from earlier times that when the North Koreans made these really brash sort of threats in meetings, we're going to turn Seoul into a lake of fire and whatnot. It really came to the fore that the South Koreans understood their northern cousins a lot better than the Americans did, because the Americans would sort of, what are they talking? How are they making these threats? What are they talking about? And the South Koreans, on the other hand, would say, "Look, mate, just calm down. He's here. He's blown off a bit of steam. That's how he works. We'll leave him for a couple of days, and we'll come back and talk to them."
Right.
So it is a really important role that South Korea plays. They are the really important role partner in the negotiations, aren't they? Because you can't beat that sort of expertise that only the South Koreans will have when it comes to the North Koreans. Now, the 2 ministers had some views about the way things currently are. What were they talking about?
Yes. Foreign Minister Chung actually addressed the media, and he was addressing some questions about Korea's choice between the 2 big rivals. And the questions were like, which side Korea would choose between China and U.S.? And his response correctly was that there can be no such question of black and white choice. He said it is unimaginable for us to pick either the United States or China. He added that neither side made such demand of Korea. And about the Quad participation, Chung also mentioned that there had been no specific discussion on this matter. So, but we can imagine that the 2 ministers may have exchanged rather candid views during their private meeting, which was not open to public. And such exchanges may provide a basis for their future consultation and cooperation to reach a common position and ultimately achieve their common goals.
I mean, it is a position that a lot of places are in at the moment, is the economic ties to China and the strategic and historical alliance ties to America, and it's a very difficult position to be put in to make a choice between 2, and nobody really wants to have to be that black and white, as he said. Now, what do you think is the implications of the latest round of this diplomatic blitz on the part of the Biden administration's global strategy?
You may remember President Biden declared that the U.S. is back on the world stage with alliances, multilateralism, and liberal democracy. And as I said, I thought it would take a while until they finish their complicated process of policy review on so many fronts and come out to engage the world. But they may have decided that they should follow up with their declarations sooner than later, particularly with the year-long pandemic situation, creating an odd contrast between the United States and China, as if the country under tight state control and one-party dictatorship is better equipped and better positioned to protect its people, while the leader of the free world is suffering so much due to its ill-prepared and disorganized response. On the other hand, now the vaccination efforts in the United States are underway, and the economic stimulus package has been passed in the U.S. Congress. And the U.S. economic growth is expected to surpass that of China this year. So the United States has new reasons to feel confident and take on the urgent work of containing the expansion of Chinese influence around the world before it is too late. So, as we said, the United States and China just had their first round, sizing up each other and presenting their differing views. So, as the first meeting, they seem to have adopted a maximalist approach to make as much demands from the other side as possible and establish strong bargaining positions. The happy days of euphoria of win-win are over, and now what we see is the serious zero-sum mindset. So it looks like we will hear the expressions free and open Indo-Pacific and rules-based international order again and again for a long time, like a refrain of some pop song as a warning to China, don't rock the boat, might.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, don't rock the boat, mate. That is, so obviously they're going to keep talking though, yeah? What do you expect? What do you hope for?
As this discussion goes on, I hope they will find some ground to work together and find areas where they can accommodate each other's demands in exchange of something else or in reciprocity. Maybe I'm a little too optimistic or wishful thinking.
Yeah.
You know what? You know what they did after the Alaska meeting? You know, United States had its meeting with NATO allies on 22nd,
okay.
and it had another meeting with the EU members. They mostly coincide with each other, but on 23rd.
Right.
And then China had a meeting with Russians on
Yes.
22nd,
Yes.
and they exchanged the letter with Kim Jong-un yesterday. So they are busy shoring up the support of their own friends and allies.
That's it, isn't it? Consolidating whose corner we're all in at the moment, yeah?
Right. But what we should pay our close attention is how this would affect Korea in search of peace, stability, and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula, and how Korea should chart its way in the midst of this potentially dangerous rivalry. So we will need a very nuanced touch with finesse to navigate this treacherous water to guarantee our security and prosperity and achieve a lasting peace on the peninsula. So
yeah.
I guess this is what a good diplomacy is all about.
That's exactly it, isn't it? I mean, it's never been an easy place to navigate the Korean Peninsula, has it?
That's our destiny.
That is it. Tread lightly, my friends. We'll leave it there. Ambassador Yoon, thank you once again for coming in, and we'll catch you again next month.
Thank you very much.